You know, I'm not an extrovert like you, I'm an introvert. This is a line that I've heard repeatedly more and more in recent years.
The topic of extroversion and introversion has crossed my mind many times, but it seemed to slip away. Until recently, it popped up again. So recently, I made a new friend at work, and we got sent to a work trip in Europe to Prague, in Czech Republic. After arriving, we decided to go out and check some bars in the evening and explore the city.
My friend, let's call him John, seemed unsure of what to do at first after we arrived at the bar, so I invited him for a few beers. We grabbed some drinks, found a seat, and then we noticed a group of foreigners next to us. I started a small conversations with them.
Then they joined us, and the group became bigger. Since I was doing most of the talking, I wanted John to feel comfortable as well. So I made sure to include him in the conversation and introduce him to everyone.
The night went pretty well. John seemed to socialize and mix well with everyone. Later, however, as we were leaving, John said something which stuck with me. He said, "You know, I'm not an extrovert like you, I'm an introvert." This actually surprised me, as John was pretty good looking, fit, fun, and outgoing guy. He seemed to socialize well with everyone, and up until that point, I would definitely not put him in an introvert category. And this got me thinking, why would he say that? Actually, John wasn't the first person to tell me that. And that got me thinking even more. Why would someone label themselves this way?
It turns out these ideas of introversion and extroversion date back to Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who introduced them in 1921.
Jung proposed that people direct their energies in one of two ways, either outward towards the world around them, or inward towards their own thoughts. He called these tendencies extroversion and introversion respectively. So, unsatisfied with a simple explanation, I decided to research further and found a few things.
In personality psychology, there is something known as the Big Five model. It is one of the most accepted personality models, which includes 5 core traits: extroversion, agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism.
In this model, extroversion represents how outgoing and social someone is versus how reserved they are. These traits apparently can impact things like social behavior, emotional experiences, and even career choice. So apparently even the neuroscience of quote-unquote extroverts and introverts differs as well. And this is explained mainly through two mechanisms: dopamine sensitivity and brain activity patterns. Dopamine sensitivity talks, of course, about dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter or a brain chemical responsible for pleasure and reward. Turns out that extroverts have a more sensitive dopamine system, which makes them more responsive to external rewards and social interactions, much more so than introverts. The brain activity component relies on brain imaging, which shows that extroverts have more blood flow going into their frontal lobes, which are parts of the brain associated with planning and introspection, while extroverts exhibit more activity in other areas related to sensory processing and external rewards. There is also a genetic component, with some studies suggest that around 40 to 60% of personality traits, including extroversion, are heritable, although environmental factors also influence a lot. Okay, so perhaps there is a scientific basis behind the terms such as introversion and extroversion. But in my opinion, the terms extroversion and introversion lie on a spectrum we all move across depending on various factors. Leading up to us going out, we spent half a day together. John was kinda tired and sleepy because we took different flights, and since I arrived earlier, I had more time to rest. We also had dinner together before going out. I had a protein rich meal while John took a more carb fueled meal. And this got me thinking, perhaps on that day, the reason for my more extroversion and John's more introversion wasn't the label itself, but rather some other factors. Factors that were in our habits and throughout the hours and days leading up to that trip. Things like sleep, diet, exercise, stress management, social and environmental factors, and perhaps many others which I just didn't think about. Let's start with sleep. The quality and amount of sleep can really affect social behavior and how quote unquote introverted or extroverted someone feels. Imagine getting just 1 to 2 hours of sleep the night before, being sleep deprived, and then expecting yourself to want to talk and socialize with a lot of people. Sleep deprivation tends to increase social withdrawal, making even people who consider themselves extroverts more likely to behave in an introverted way. Perhaps sleep deprived people are more likely to avoid social situations and feel less positive about interacting with others. Next would be the diet. Carbohydrates and sugar consumption are known to cause rapid insulin spikes, followed by crashes in blood sugar level, leading to mood swings and fatigue. Imagine eating a full pizza covered in cheese. It's no surprise that I'll get tired, I'll get brain fog, and yeah, I won't feel like talking to anyone either. Caffeine, on the other hand, can give me a temporary energy boost and boost in alertness, making me a bit more sociable and extroverted. Well, at least on the short term. Next comes the exercise. When we exercise or do physical activity, we release endorphins and other neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin, which enhance our mood and sociability. This is exactly why people feel a positive boost after exercise. Another point is stress management. Now, a lot of people talk about this, but I think two factors are really worth considering. Number one is meditation and mindfulness, and number two is your cortisol levels. With meditation and mindfulness, you're basically practicing to quiet down those self-judging voices and be present to the moment. So you can enjoy the present moment when socializing with somebody and not always be self-judging. Oh, am I doing something right? Am I doing something wrong? Because actually, in most cases, I don't think anybody cares. In regards to the cortisol level, cortisol is a stress hormone. If you've been overworked or going through something in your life, your cortisol is probably going to be high. You're probably going to be gaining weight, probably going to be feeling tired and basically like shit. And no wonder in this state, if your cortisol is high, that you would not be very keen on socializing. The last, and perhaps in my opinion, the most important factor to talk about is social and environmental factors, particularly something which I made up or I want to coin is called gradual desensitization. Correction, I probably read it somewhere. I believe that the way we live today, constantly on our phones or online, is causing us to slowly lose the basic social skills, the primary social skills which our ancestors used to communicate together. Skills that make us humans and connect to other people. If you've spent an entire weekend at home, whether just chilling, playing video games or watching TV, or even doing something productive like working or solving some problem, your brain is in logic mode. It is not primed to socialize. It is not in this relaxed, flowing state where you can connect to people easily. What is needed is gradual, consistent socializing. Daily, or at least semi-daily interaction with other people. Interactions that are real and meaningful, not virtual or online. And no, sending memes and reels doesn't count. This progressive social exposure on a consistent basis keeps you socially tuned and make it less likely that you'll feel like you're emerging from the woods whenever you're going to speak to somebody. Conclusion. So, what I'm really getting at here is that labeling ourselves as introverts, quote unquote, has become trendy in recent years. When I was a kid, and even in my teens, no one used to come and say, I'm an introvert, as an excuse for not socializing. Sure, some people were naturally more outgoing than others, but the idea of self labeling oneself as introvert just wasn't a thing. Oddly enough, I almost never hear anyone say, hey, I'm an extrovert, which only adds to this introvert trend. Here is the real question. Are you truly an introvert, or are you using it as a cover up for suboptimal habits or social anxiety? Is it possible that what you're labeling as introversion is actually just lack of social practice, avoidance, or habits that aren't serving you? Perhaps labeling yourself as introvert is actually holding you back. It's creating a self fulfilling prophecy, reinforcing patterns of withdrawal and social isolation, instead of pushing you to address some underlying issues. Think about it. Are you really an introvert? Or are there other factors at play? Thank you.